If any TV sitcom goes on long enough, I guarantee at some point there'll be an episode with a magician. Maybe one of the main characters performs as a hobby, or maybe there's a guest character who does magic. These people will never be the charismatic hero of the story. They will be the punchline. In pop culture media, magic isn't cool, despite magic as a practice having existed for literally thousands of years. It doesn't hold a fraction of the prestige held by music, or acting, or painting, or dance. When those artists wish to express their heartfelt, sincere truths, they do so in the form of an album, or a gallery, or a recital, or a play. Growing up, the only time I ever saw a magician express their heartfelt truths, the only time, was on TV talent shows. Many people, myself included, believe Derren Brown to be the greatest living magician, and yet he does not refer to himself as a magician. Like Houdini before him, who referred to himself as the handcuff king and prison breaker, Derren uses the tools of a magician to present a different genre of performance, psychological illusion or mentalism. Both Brown and Houdini understood the stigma attached to the title magician. I have no qualms about admitting to people I'm a writer and an actor, but as ridiculous as it sounds, I have often struggled confessing I am also a magician. Some of my earliest and most happy childhood memories involve showing card tricks to my granddad, but as a magician, throughout most of my life, I have never felt comfortable calling myself an artist. When I was 14 years old, I made an accidental discovery. And although I didn't understand it at the time, I've since come to realize that moment not only changed the direction of my life, but my understanding of magic as an art form. The problem it has and the solution. It's a solution so obvious other art forms have been adopting it for millennia. Magic, like comedy and horror, is a genre, a style of art, comprising of a series of techniques designed to elicit an emotional response. Most would agree the chief emotions evoked through magic are amazement and wonder. But is that all magic is capable of? When was the first time you ever saw a magic trick? Was it an uncle's card trick at a family party? Have you scrolled past tricks on Facebook or TikTok? Maybe it was some hopeful on a talent competition, desperately trying to impress a panel of judges with sleight of hand and a heartfelt life story. If you're struggling to remember, I'll tell you. You were barely 8 months old, and someone leant over your helpless body and covered their face with their hands. You, not having any sense of object permanence, witnessed a truly impossible disappearance. For a few moments, you existed in static limbo, uncertain and curious, before the hands were removed and your mother's face returned. How did you feel? Would the word be amazement? What if it wasn't her face? Studies have shown if you cover your face in front of a small child, then switch for someone they don't know and uncover, the result is not giggles and smiles. Awe is a much deeper emotion, often associated with experiencing the power of a god. It is a combination of both amazement and fear. There was a time when practitioners of magic did more than entertain. They made the rain. They cast illusions on their enemies. They whispered into the ears of kings. And now they perform coin tricks in restaurants to diners waiting for their dinner. In 1587, a man called Reginald Scott wrote a book called The Discovery of Witchcraft. It is credited as the first work on illusions and what would become modern performance magic. Did he write it for the benefit of conjurers so they might get better at their tricks? No. He wrote it in a desperate attempt to prevent hundreds of women and men being tortured to death after having been accused of sorcery. Did it work? Sure. Logic always trumps fear, doesn't it? Barely 4 years later, a book was written in the defense of executing witches, a book called The Demonology, a dissertation on ritual black magic. And who wrote it? The King of England, James I, a name you might recognize from the front of every Bible, the King James Bible. You see, James was a fiercely pious man who truly believed in the evils of sorcery, so much so, he personally supervised the torture of many witches. Can you imagine thinking that of magic? Instead of top hats and rabbits, your thoughts jump to demons and malevolent spirits hell-bent on stealing your immortal soul. Before magic ever amazed people, it frightened them. But can it still frighten them in a world where everyone knows magic is just a trick? When Scott wrote his discovery of witchcraft, he lived in a world where people believed in magic. No longer do we believe. But if you want to know how a trick is done, all you've got to do is scroll down to the comment section, and I promise someone's going to tell you. Is this magic's problem? We no longer live in a world where a secret can be kept? I don't think so. Any magic-based performer who allows their audience to leave the theater believing in some untruth about the way in which the effect was achieved, be it a psychic or some other more subtle falsehood, is, I believe, immoral. Art should not rely on a permanent lie, nor does it have to, in order to make its audience feel. Do you feel any less knowing the actor playing Macbeth can't really see a dagger floating before them, the handle toward my hand? Magic does not need your belief to amaze or to frighten you, so what does it need? Horror and magic share almost identical methods to produce a reaction from their audience. There's countless articles and video essays on the internet comparing the techniques used in creating a jump scare to that of a magic trick. Both use misdirection, tension, and for many years horror, like magic, was a sideshow, a ghost train, not an art form. In recent times, public opinion has changed. Now, thanks to the like of Stanley Kubrick, Jordan Peele, Stephen King, John Carpenter, prestige horror is a respected medium. How can magic learn from this? How can magic reach such elevated heights? In horror films, we, the audience, feel for the characters, and the horror puts those characters in danger. In a good horror film, every scare has dire consequences for those characters. We don't fear for ourselves. We fear for them. Horror evolved beyond the ghost trains and sideshows because it learned how to tell a story. When I was 14, I took drama classes in school, and one day, our teacher told us to prepare a story to perform the following week. I spent all weekend writing and practicing, and come Monday morning, I sat cross-legged in front of the whole class, holding a dinner fork I'd pinched from our kitchen at home. As I spoke, I played with the fork, passing it between my hands. My story was a ghost story about a small boy who had a friend his parents couldn't see. His friend would join him for dinner every day, and the boy insisted his mother put out an extra plate by the empty chair. In the beginning, his parents were willing to play along, but when they awoke to find rooms tossed, ornaments broken, and chairs stacked atop tables, they decided to intervene, but their son told them it wasn't me, it was my friend. The next day at dinner, the mother refused to set out an extra plate. She wasn't going to play along anymore. At this point in the story, I took my fork and placed it down on the ground in front of me so my whole class could see. I told them how the mother sat down to eat, but when she did, something happened. And my whole class watched as that fork slowly slid across the floor. It was a simple trick. I'd hoped it would get a round of applause or a gasp of amazement from my teacher. Instead, they stared, silent, apart from a few who screamed. I believe stories to be the most fundamental particle of art. They mimic the way our brains learn information. For centuries, stories have elevated film, writing, acting, dance, painting, even music. Magic is more than a means to an end. It is a tool you can use, just as Picasso used a brush, just as Dickens used a pen, just as Spielberg used a camera, a tool to tell a story. Stories give magic the two things it needs to gain back the reverence it so painfully deserves. Just two things: how and why. Magicians are quite obsessed with trying to get their audience not to think about how a trick is done, and instead just appreciate it for what it is. But this is impossible. Magic, by its very nature, invites the question of how. So tell them. Don't tell them it's sleight of hand. We all know that, and no one cares. Tell them it's fairies. Tell them you sold your soul to the devil for a deck of cards that'll never lose. Tell them you're performing occult rituals from the demonology. You're not trying to get anyone to believe you, merely asking them to suspend their disbelief. The how is the beginning of a story. It's the form, the structure, but on its own it doesn't matter. And magicians must make magic matter. To do that, you've got to tell them why. Why perform such magic? Don't say you want to entertain them. Don't drone on about spreading wonder to people's lives. This is a given. We experience art to be entertained, to be emotionally affected. I'm talking about why. Why did you sell your soul to the devil for a deck of cards that'll never lose? Do you need the money? Are you gambling with your life? What are the stakes? Why perform the demonology's occult rituals? To prove they work? To contact the other side? Are you trying to steal someone's soul? Might sound far-fetched, but hell, so does Star Wars. And I defy anyone here who wasn't shaken to hear Darth Vader say to Luke, "No, I am your father." Why should magic strive for anything less? To be clear, I am putting my own theories to the test. I'm currently touring the UK with my own show, A Ghost Story Told, using magic. In it, I claim to perform black magic rituals from the demonology. And I have discovered that allowing magic to tell a story frees it from the confines of mere amazement. It allows you to express your personal truth in a means befitting an artist. I believe magic can do so much more than amaze you. I believe magic can thrill you, entice you, excite you, provoke you, challenge you, romance you, inspire you. But above all else, I believe magic can and should frighten you. My name's David Alnwick. Thank you so much.